Let's sound the Simmi alarms! Welcome everybody, welcome to another video here on Power Staples. I'm Teecee. Today we're reviewing one of my newest EDH commander decks, which is actually built around Tatyova, Benthic Druid. It's a kind of new card from Dominaria, and this is a very strong deck I built around this because it's focused so much on ramp and also on putting additional land drops into play, and also with this powerful mechanic for landfall abilities to trigger. So many cards are in there that, for example, like Avenger of Zendikar and all this stuff, to use the best of our land drops that we have. And also we have kind of like the best lands, especially for these two colors that we have. It's the Simmi colors, so we have so many cards like this. For example, Gaia's Cradle is in there, and also Dark Depth is in here, so Marit-Lage will come to visit, and all this other stuff. It's a very powerful deck built around so many staples in here. So I'm very happy and proud to show it to you guys, and let me know what you think. Please leave a comment, please like and subscribe if you didn't do that already. It would be very nice. I would appreciate it a lot. And first of all, let's talk about our commander. Tatyova, Benthic Druid. For 3, a green and a blue mana. It's a 3/3 Benthic Druid, and she has a very unique ability that she says whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life and draw a card. Well, first off, life gain is quite nice because you most likely don't die because of the pressure your opponent is coming to get to you. So this is very nice if you have additional life points. Of course, why not? We have other cards in there like Curse of Crucible that provides you additional life each time a land enters the battlefield under our control. So it really adds up. And we also have Zoran Orb in here. So it's sooner or later we get a lot of life. And we have a lot of life to stash for Aetherflux Reservoir. Then we can pay 50 life if we have that. And then we can shoot 50 damage to our opponent. So this is very powerful, especially in a deck like with Simmi colors, when opponent is most likely not willing to believe what's going on, that we can shoot him in the face for 50 damage with a Simic deck. So this is a very great surprise we have in here. And then also the ability that we draw a card each time a land enters the battlefield under our control is very powerful. This is what Tatyova simply basically does in this deck. So whenever we get a land, for example we play a fetch land, then we draw a card and gain a life. And then when we crack the fetch land, we pay the life, then we get the land from our deck, and we gain another life and we draw another card. So we thin out our deck and we also draw cards. And especially when these cards return over and over again, for example with Crucible of Worlds and Life from the Loam and stuff, we can play these lands over and over again with all these additional land drops we can have, like with Azusa and stuff, and all the things, exploration, think of all these possibilities. So this really adds up. We get many life and we draw so many cards. So this is really powerful. So Laboratory Maniac is one of our main win conditions in this deck, simply because we draw our entire library sooner or later. Not completely in one big swing, but really sooner or later. This can happen, and this is good if this happens, because we have this card then. We can also flash it in with Alchemist's Refuge and all this stuff. So this really adds up on value right there. Then let's talk about the creatures in our deck. Tatyova can stay right here. First of all, we have Crufix, God of Horizons. This is a very powerful creature, of course. I have a whole Eldrazi deck where Crufix is the commander of this deck. But first off, it is very strong also in here, because first of all we can dig it out of our deck. We have cards like, for example, Green Sun Zenith in here for 5 converted mana cost, 3 and then Simmi colors. And it's indestructible, of course. It's an enchantment creature god, and it's not a creature unless our devotion is 7 or more of all our mana symbols, green and blue combined. And Crufix says that we have no maximum hand size, which of course benefits the power of Tatyova, because we draw so many cards. Of course, that's very nice. And we also have the ability that when our mana empties from our mana pool, which was not used and it's stored in our mana pool, then it becomes colorless instead. And it does not leave our mana pool, it stays. So we have kind of like a bank, a stash for our mana. So this is very powerful, especially with so many cards. For example, Blue Sun Zenith and also Green Sun Zenith. We also have cards like there, like a Genesis Wave. So if we have like 50 mana, that's great. Or we have 10 mana, that's also great. Because we can use that to produce much value because of these X spells, especially like Genesis Wave. This is hilarious. So we can get all our mana, we can use it, we can stash it. If we don't need it, it's fine, because it will stay, because Crufix is on the battlefield. As long as this is the case, we can also protect him with like counter magic and stuff. So it's most likely that we save our mana and also the cards we draw. So combined with Tatyova, we have card draw, we have mana that doesn't empty, we have a little bit of life gain, and we have this powerful ability that we do not have to discard our hands due to our hand size at the end of our turn in the discard phase. So this is really a great combination. And then we have a 4/7 drop with also indestructible, so it really adds up on value on the battlefield, on presence as well. Very, very strong. We have to play it, really. Then we have another staple in Simmi colors, let's say. Thrasios, Triton Hero. For 2 converted mana cost, only the Simmi colors, green and blue. Then we have a Malfolk Wizard, and he has a very strong ability whenever we pay 4 mana. So let's think about all the mana we could possibly stash with all these abilities, Crucifix and all this stuff, and all these mana producing cards like the Excavator that we could untap more and more and stuff like that. And whenever we pay 4 mana, we scry 1. And then reveal the top card of our library. If it's a land card, you put it onto the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, draw a card. So first of all, we scry, so we get something really good, let's say. Whatever we need, if we need a land or not, it's possible you can totally find out what's going on. And then afterwards, we get the land into play additionally. It's an additional land drop. And if it's not the case, if it's not a land card, then we get to draw that card. And all for 4 mana. So this is especially powerful when Crucifix gets handled, like it has to return to our hand or something like that, or if it gets like an Oblivion Ring or stuff, then we could only use all this mana that we stashed, for example, for this ability of Thrasios, let's say that. And also like an end of turn abilities, when we have to keep our mana open due to have counter magic available and something like this. And then when it happens, we can also produce so much value. And with all the lands we have and all the mana we have in this deck, all this ramp, this is powerful, and especially with Chaos Cradle and all these powerful triggers we have, this gets really out of hand. So this is a powerful card. Needless to say more, play it in all of your Simic decks, please. Then there's Palindrome, which is most likely here to get an infinite value. We can get infinite amount of mana. Of course, there's not an infinite, it's not a loop. We have to take over it, but let's say like 1 billion mana. We could produce easily with Palindrome. So Palindrome, first of all, is a creature for 5 and 2 blue. It's a 7 converted mana cost, but that's not too scary, honestly. First of all, we have all this ramp, let's say that, and we also have this combination. If this happens only once, then we got infinite mana, and then it's not the problem. It's a 4/5 flying creature, and the ability says when it enters the battlefield, we untap up to 7 of our lands. And so many of our lands provide more than 1 mana. Let's say that Chaos Cradle and all this stuff, Ancient Tomb, so many things. We can tap many lands for more than 1 mana. So that really adds up, so we can get more mana out of it than the 7 lands that we are going to tap for it. It's like a free creature, but we really can also get mana out of it when we play it. And then we have a powerful ability right there. We can pay 2 of any color and 2 blue mana, a total of 4. And when we pay that, we return that Palindrome from the battlefield back into our hand. So this gets hilarious as well, if we have so many cards that can tap for multiple amounts of mana. So then we can play the Palindrome again after our lands untap and we have stored so many mana in our mana pool. And then we can do it again and again and again. This kind of like really loops on its own. If it's possible to have so many land drops that provide many mana, then it's very, very good. Soon enough, we only need the Chaos Cradle, so keep the chain going, and then we get as many mana as we want, like 1 billion, 100 billion, whatever you want to. Whatever our heart desires in terms of mana. And of course, Crucifix can stash it up if it's on a battlefield, so this combination is strong on its own. But we can combine it, especially with this card. This is also a great combination to combine this powerful effect. We can copy it with this image for 1 in a blue. It comes into play. First of all, it's a 0/0 creature, but that's not really the case. It enters the battlefield. So it's any creature we choose and not target. We choose it on the battlefield. Of course, Palindrome is not legendary, so we can copy the Palindrome. Then we have for 2 mana, and then we can turn it our hand for 4, and then play it, and it says then when it enters the battlefield, we untap up to 7 lands. So this really adds up on value as well. And if we don't need it, if let's say we have all the mana we want, in this case, then also this image provides us with so many other abilities. We can copy any creature on the battlefield, does not have to be our own. So this is very nice, and we can also get this come into play abilities for, let's say, like Internal Witness or whatever our heart desires with all the cards we have, Reclamation Sage, whatever we want, Hoof Behemoth, anything is possible. So this is really efficient for 2 mana anyway. Very great card. And then there's Azusa, Lost But Seeking. She is an altered version. I love her, it's powerful. For 2 in a green, it's a 1/2 creature. And she says then when she's on the battlefield, we get 2 additional land drops. We can put 2 additional lands into play on each of our turns when she's on the battlefield. So this really adds up because we have many other cards in this deck that provides us with additional land drops. And especially we have cards out like Remnant of Excavator or let's say like the Crucible of Worlds. We can play the cards from our graveyard, our land cards. And then it really adds up with our fetch lands that we sacrificed. And also like for example a Wasteland, Strip Mine, all this stuff. It can return back from the graveyard. And we can play it over and over again. 2 times Strip Mine, for example, wins game on its own. This is very, very strong. This is crazy. So we have all this combined into this 1/2 creature for 3 mana. Very efficient. And it's also most likely the case when the opponent is trying to get rid of our lands. We can sacrifice them like with Zuran Orb. And then we can put them back into play. So Azusa helps a lot to manage our land drops. Very great card. And there is Oracle Muldaya. This is also wonderful. I love it. It's an Elf Shaman. It's a 2/2 creature. And when we play an additional land on each of our turns, so this really adds up on the amount of lands we can put into play each turn. And then also we play with the top card of our library revealed. So anyone knows what's coming from our deck. And you may play the top card of our library if it's a land card. So of course there are many lands in this deck. I guess there's like 44 or something. And if it's not a land card, then we most likely are able to shuffle our deck due to our additional land drops and due to our fetch lands we have. Or let's say we can also use a tutor or something, anything that shuffles our deck. And then most likely, if we are lucky, we get additional land drops like from the top. And this is nice, isn't it? Then there's Codes of Crucifix, as I mentioned. We also play with the top card of our library revealed. And you can also use this ability whenever a land is in the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life. This is the same that Tatyova does, so we gain more life for Aetherflux Reservoir or simply to stay alive. Simply like that. And we can also play the top card of our library as a land card, just the same thing like Oracle of Muldaya. And this is like a 2/4 creature. It's an enchantment creature for 3 converted mana cost. Also very strong. And this provides us with another additional land drop if we have the City's Blessing, which we get when we have 10 or more permanents on the battlefield at the same time. When we have this card, when we play it, then we get the City's Blessing. This effect is permanent. It doesn't leave the battlefield anyhow. We just have it. It's not a permanent. And when this is the case, this 5/5 dinosaur for 3 converted mana cost can also attack and block. Then it's very nice. And we also have this strong effect that we get additional land drops out of him as well. Then there's Tireless Tracker. Also a very nice card. It's kind of like a modern staple, let's say. Many decks use him these days. For 2 in a green mana, it's a 3/2 creature human scout. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we investigate. So we get one of these nice clues here. It's an artifact that enters the battlefield that way, and we can pay 2 and sacrifice this artifact to draw a card. So this provides us with additional card draw abilities. And also, whenever we sacrifice a clue, we put a +1/+1 counter on Tireless Tracker. So it really gets really big sooner or later. Why not? Nice. Then there's Lotus Cobra. For 1 in a green mana, it's a 2/1 snake creature. And she has the landfall ability as well. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we may add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. And especially with all these land drops, we can easily get like 9 mana for free. When she stays on the battlefield, it's very powerful. Also mana of any color. Nice. And there's Remnant of Excavator. It's kind of like our Crucible of Worlds on a stick. Of course, we have Crucible in this deck as well. For 2 in a green mana, it's the 2/3 creature, the Naga Cleric. And we play lands from our graveyard. Of course, only 1 per turn visually, because we have so many land drops, you can do it like over and over again. So as I mentioned, this is a great combination with all the lands we have and all these landfall abilities. So this really adds up on value here. Then there's World Shaper. It's kind of like a backup plan. For 3 in a green mana, it's a 3/3 creature, Merfolk Shaman, another Merfolk for Tatyova right there. And when it attacks, we put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard to possibly hit cards like Life from the Loam. It would be very nice, and also hitting land drops that we can play out from the graveyard. And then when World Shaper dies, we put all land cards from our graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. So this is great, especially when someone gets rid of our lands like an Armageddon stuff. for example, then we can get all our lands back whenever World Shaper dies from the battlefield. So very powerful here, especially with Zuran Orb as a combination to get many life. And then there's Titania, Protector of Argoth. For 3 and 2 green mana, it's a 5/3 legendary creature elemental, and when she enters the battlefield, we return target land card from our graveyard on the battlefield. This is especially very nice with cards like Gear's Cradle, when someone like strip mines it or something, very nice on value. And she's a 5/3 creature, and whenever a land we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, for example when we sacrifice it due to Zuran Orb and stuff, and we also sacrifice, for example, all these other things like fetch land and do some things, then whenever this happens, we create a 5/3 elemental creature token, and it's green and it enters the battlefield like this. So we get an army of these creatures if we have like Zuran Orb and stuff. Very, very nice. Love this. Then we have Eternal Witness, of course, that's the FNM promo. For 1 and 2 green mana, it's a 2/1 creature, and when she enters the battlefield, we get any card from our graveyard we can target and put it back into our hand. Yes, this is recursion, this is good, especially we can use this card over and over in this deck. So we have Cloudstone Courier in here, so we can bounce Eternal Witness back and forth if we get lucky with this. So we can get many cards out of your graveyard that way. All the sorceries, all the stuff that we want, all the things that get getting discarded, or when they are destroyed or something, we can get it back. We can rebuild from this very easily with cards like this Eternal Witness here. Nice. And then we have World Breaker, a little bit situational way to get rid of opponents like artifacts and enchantments, and also lands in here. World Breaker for 6 and a green, but we are the ramp deck, don't worry, it will work. It's an Eldrazi, it has the Void, so it is colorless. It's a 5/7 creature for 7 converted mana cost. And when we cast the World Breaker, we exile target artifact, enchantment or land. And it has reach. And when it's on the graveyard, we can play 2 and 1 colorless mana, but it has to be colorless mana and not any color. And when we pay that, and we also sacrifice a land due to our costs, and then we can return the World Breaker from our graveyard to our hand. So use him again and again. Very powerful. And then we have Reclamation Sage, another way to get rid of opponents' artifacts and enchantments, let's say that. For 2 and a green mana, it's a 2/1 Elf Shaman, and when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is a great way, especially with all these Cloudstone Courier synergies, to get rid of multiple artifacts and enchantments if we are lucky with the Cloudstone Courier and stuff. So why not? A very efficient way, especially good if we have cards like Green Sun Zenith, so we can fetch for it. It's just 3 converted mana cost, and this Eldrazi is really, really high in converted mana cost. So whatever the situation is, we could get rid of artifacts and enchantments probably fine. And there's Scavenging Ooze, also a great card. Of course, we have to have anything in this deck that will stop your opponents from having graveyard synergies like that. For 1 and a green mana, it's a 2/2 Ooze creature, and whenever we pay a green mana and we exile a card from a graveyard, then we can also put 1/1/1 counter on it and gain 1 life if the card that we removed was a creature card. But we can remove any card from our graveyard whenever we pay green. So we can do it over and over again if we want to, and especially in response to like a reanimation spell and stuff. It's very efficient here. We can use it to get rid of opponents' graveyard synergy cards. And then there's Sylvan Safekeeper. For 1 green mana, it's a 1/1 wizard, and we can sacrifice a land whenever we want as the cost. And when we do, target creature we control can't be the target of spells or abilities this turn. So this is like a sacrifice outlet, just like Zuran Orb. And it also can protect our creatures. That's what we want, right? For 1 green mana, we can easily tutor for it with Green Sun Zenith and stuff. Very nice. And then there's Seedborn Muse. For 3 and 2 green mana, it's a 2/4 spirit creature, and she has the unique ability, at the beginning of each other player's untap step, we untap all cards that we control, which are also lands and all other cards, like all these artifacts, all these creatures that we control. Everything untaps in each other player's turn. So if you find a way to flash in cards, this is a very great combination. And also keeping the mana open for counter magic and things like all these regular instances we originally want to play. So this is strong, that we can tap out on our turn and then everything untaps at the beginning of each other player's turn. So we can easily add mana, especially with Crewfix. Then we can add all the mana into our mana pool. It doesn't empty, it just gets colorless because of Crewfix ability. And then we can untap it anyway next turn, especially in a multiplayer game. Wow, powerful. Need to play. And there's Rampaging Mana. For 4 and 2 green mana, it's a 6/6 beast creature with trample, and it has the landfall ability. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we create a 4/4 green beast creature. This is great. It's not trample as the original Balos does, but it's very nice. It's a great way to flood the board, especially with all these landfall triggers. It's easily possible to get like 10 landfall triggers in a turn. So we have an army of great beast creatures. This is also like the green Omnath, because obviously we cannot play Omnath Locus of Rage, because Omnath is red and green, and we cannot play red in this deck, not play red cards. So we have to stick on with Rampaging Mana. Otherwise, of course, we would prefer Omnath, which can get 5/5 creatures, but this is also strong enough on its own. In a Simic deck, we go for that. Then we have Avenger of Zendikar. For 5 and 2 green mana, 7 converted mana cost, we get a huge elemental. It's 5/5, and when it enters the battlefield, we put a 0/1 plant creature token into play for each land we control. So that means we get a lot of plant tokens probably. This is very nice. And all these plant tokens also have the nice synergy with Avenger of Zendikar. Then when Avenger of Zendikar is into play, then we have the landfall trigger. When the land enters the battlefield under our control, then we may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature we control. So this really adds up. It's just another army in a pocket. Wonderful in this deck with all these land drops. Love it. And then we have Miloku, the Clouded Mirror. For 4 in a blue mana, it's a 2/4 creature, Moonfall Wizard. It's a legendary creature with flying. And whenever we pay 1 mana of any color, and then we return a land we control to our hand, then we put a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So this is very nice because we can return our lands, because the land can tap for itself and return it to a hand. We get a creature like to block with, or to get an army of flying creatures that way. And we also get our lands back that we could play again and get these landfall triggers again. This card doesn't cost that much, but she is very efficient in this deck. Great, because we have all these abilities. We can get so many tokens in for the win, for example, like this. We can fly over with all these evasive flying creatures. When our opponent is blocking on the ground, for example, we can simply fly over it. We also can save our lands that way. When, for example, a land is destroyed, or like many lands are destroyed, and we have so many mana, then we can use that ability of Miloku to return the lands to our hand and eventually play it next turn and something like that. And we also get in a situation where we can just save our lands from destruction, from like an Armageddon and stuff. Especially if we have many mana in our mana pool due to Crewfix's ability. Then we can just return all our lands to our hand if we want to, and then we get an army of creatures to swing for the win or to block for days. This is a great card. Then we have Hoof Behemoth. For 4 and 2 green mana, it's just like a game finisher right there. It's a 5/5 beast with haste. And when it enters the battlefield, all creatures that we control get +X and trample until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures that we control. This is great if we have so many creatures, all these beast tokens, all these elemental tokens, and all this plant token, all this stuff. It really adds up like this. And of course, with cloudstone courier, we could easily bounce the Hoof Behemoth when we play another creature, and then we can play him again if we have a lot of mana, which we most likely will have in this situation. And then we can play him like 2 or 3 times a turn. So, wow, this really adds up on value. This is crazy. And we can do it in this deck very easily. And then there's Laboratory Maniac, one of our main win conditions. If this game goes very long, we eventually deck ourselves because we draw so many cards and we thin out so many lands of our deck and stuff. But with Laboratory Maniac, we avoid losing because of that game goes long. For 2 in a blue mana, we get a human wizard with 2/2. When it's on the battlefield, we have that ability. If we would draw a card while our library has no cards in it, we win the game instead of losing the game. If we have no cards in our library, then and now with this card on the battlefield, we win instead. This is especially great when someone really like decks us. It's totally possible that we have to like draw 20 cards or like 40 cards, all in a row because of our opponent's cards. And then when we start the turn and we cannot draw, then we lose. So if Laboratory Maniac is in our hand and we have Alchemist's Refuge on the battlefield, even if our library has no cards in it, we can just untap, activate this Alchemist's Refuge, all our cards in our hand have flash, and then we can flash in Laboratory Maniac and win the game on the spot before we draw. For example, this is a great combination, and then we win the game no matter what the board state is, no matter how many opponents are still alive in the situation. Very strong, great synergy with so many effects that draw cards out of our deck. And then we have Walking Ballista, the last creature in this deck. This is very great. For 2 times X, we get a construct. It's 0/0 at first, but it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. And we can always play 4 whenever we want, as often as we want. And then we put a +1/+1 counter on Walking Ballista. So if you really loop right there with all these palindrome synergies, and we have like a billion mana, we can put additional counters on it, even if it comes into play really, really low, or we can just play it for like a billion. And then we can remove a +1/+1 counter from Walking Ballista as often as we want. And if we do, Walking Ballista deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This is colorless damage. This is 1 damage at a time. And then over and over again, it just machine guns our opponent. So this really gets powerful if we have like a billion mana, a million infinite amount of mana right there. And then this is a great solution to many problems. We can shoot down, first of all, like cards like a Platinum Angel or Platinum Imperial and stuff like that. We can shoot them first, and then we can shoot our opponent, or by a big swing. This Walking Ballista is hilarious in a deck that has a billion mana. The possibility right there. And even if you just play it for 21, it's just good enough. It's powerful. Have to play it in here. And then we're in for our sorceries. Of course, Scapeshift is a classic in a landfall deck, needed to say more. For 2 and 2 green mana, the sorcery says we sacrifice any number of lands, and this is not a cost, it is the effect. If it's countered, we don't sacrifice anything. That's what you want to say about that. And then we search our library for up to that many land cards that we sacrificed, then put them onto the battlefield tab, then shuffle our library. So this gets crazy because we can sacrifice the cards we don't need. Actually, it's just like a sacrifice outlet that way. We can play lands out of a graveyard, then it really adds up on value right there. And we get cards out of a deck like Gas Cradle and everything we want, and all this stuff like Deserted Temple that untaps Gas Cradle, for example, and so many other lands that we really want. All these fetch lands, all these synergies, everything is open right there. Of course, we lack red on this part, because this is like the Scapeshift deck in Modern, which uses only Grapeshift in combination with Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, which we cannot use, because this is a card that provides red mana, and this is not efficient to us. We cannot play it in a Simic deck, we will only have green and blue cards available here, so this really is the problem, we cannot use it. But even if it's not a combo on its own, is so powerful. The value is insane that we can get with this deck when we use this card. So this is kind of like a no-brainer in this deck, of course. And then, as I mentioned before, there's Genesis Wave. That's a great mana sink. For X and 2 green mana, we get the sorcery that said we reveal the top X cards of our library. We put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all other cards revealed this way that we weren't put in a battlefield into our graveyard. So why is this good? Because we have so much mana. Let's say that if we played for 20, it's just fine. And we played for like all the cards in our deck, it's even better. Because the cards that really help us win are permanents. So we can really do it. Especially with Walking Ballista. When it enters the battlefield, it just dies because it's 0/0. But of course, we can use the ability to pay 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this really adds up. It's not dying that way. And everything else, if we have a really big amount of mana right there, it's just powerful to live through all these effects and get all these Genesis waves going. So we get all the cards we need on the battlefield. This counts for lands, of course. It will trigger all this landfall stuff, and we can get so many cards onto the battlefield that we couldn't get there before. It's kind of like the best draw spell in the universe if we have so many permanents, and if anything else goes to the graveyard, it's not the problem. Because Laboratory Maniac will stay too, and then if we play it for the same amount of cards that we have in our deck, let's say we have 50 cards in our deck, we play X for 50, and then everything else goes to the graveyard, and then Laboratory Maniac enters, and then if we draw a card right there, we win the game. Very nice. Have to play it. And then there's Animist Awakening. This is just another kind of like big ramp spell. For X and a green, we put the top X cards from our deck, we reveal it, and any land cards come into play tapped, and the rest on the bottom of our library. And this card has Spell Mastery too. If we have 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in our graveyard, we untap these lands. So this is a very nice combination to get mana out of it, because otherwise if we would play it, it's a sorcery, then we won't have any mana. If we don't have a Seedborn Muse like this, we want to play it for as much as possible. So we put so many lands into play, they come into play tapped, and then that's about for our turn. But if we have Spell Mastery active, then we can untap those lands, and then we can play with all these lands that we got and use its abilities and stuff and all these landfall triggers, and we have mana then. So this is very nice if we have the Spell Mastery as well. And then there's Life from the Loam, of course, the classic. For 1 and a green mana, it says we can return up to 3 target land cards from our graveyard to our hand, and it has Dredge. When it's in the graveyard, we can, instead of drawing a card, we can just skip that draw, and instead we can put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard, and then we can return Life from the Loam to our hand. So this is nice when we dredge, so we can hit additional lands out of it, and then we can grab all these lands that we want to, 3 at a time, or up to 3, let's say that, with Life from the Loam. So this is powerful, especially if we discard it early or play it early if it's necessary, that we can dredge and get additional value by hitting all these lands that we can return. And with all these land drops that we get each turn, nice combination online. This card is powerful. And then there's Splendid Reclamation. For 3 and a green mana, it's a sorcery that says we return all land cards from our graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Of course, this is great, especially after a board wipe, or if we have to sacrifice so many lands, stuff like that, or if we just like get milled or something. We have many lands in our graveyard, all these fetch lands that we cracked, and then anything comes back in a big swing. That's what we want. And think of all these landfall triggers. Wow! Nice! And then there's one of the bigger spells in this deck, Praetor's Council. For 5 and 3 green mana, the sorcery says we return all cards from our graveyard to our hand. Any cards, any types, anything. And then we exile Praetor's Council, and also we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. This effect does not end of turn, of course. This effect is permanent until the game ends. So we have no maximum hand size. It's also great if, for example, Crucible gets hit by anything like an Oblivion Ring or something, and we lose control of it, then we also don't have to discard our cards back to the amount that we can hold, like 7 or something. So this does not happen. We have no maximum hand size anymore. Powerful. And we also get so many cards back to our hand. All this stuff. This is very efficient. If we ever manage to get this card going, and with all this ramp and all its abilities, it's really possible to do that, then this gets really out of hand. If this is not countered, that's great. Really great. And then there's Green Sun Zenith. For X and a green mana, the sorcery says that we can get any creature from out of our deck, any green creature, let's say that, with converted mana cost of X or less, and put it into play. And then we also shuffle Green Sun Zenith back into our deck as part of the effect. So we can possibly get multiple effects out of it, because we can draw Green Sun Zenith sooner or later again and use it again on another target in our deck. Why not? Because we draw so many cards, this most likely happens for real. Nice. And then there's Crop Rotation. For 1 green mana, this instance says sacrifice a land due to the cost, and then we can search your deck for any land card and put it into play. This most likely searches for Gaea's Cradle, honestly, but there are so many other targets that are very valid and very useful. But of course, this is kind of like the second copy for Gaea's Cradle in our deck. We search for it like 90% of the time, so nice to have it in here, sure. And there's Kodama's Reach. Yes, it's kind of like the basic ramp. For 2 and a green mana, we search our library for 2 basic land cards, put one of them into the battlefield tapped, and the other one into our hand. And if we have additional land drops, or we didn't play a land this turn, we can play it onto the battlefield as well, of course untapped. We have like 10 basics in here, I guess. So this is very nice, just a basic ramp to make sure that Tatyova will enter soon enough. Then there's Intuition. For 2 and a blue mana, it's an instant that says we search our library for any 3 cards and reveal them. An opponent chooses one of them that we can get into our hand, and the rest cards and put into our graveyard. Of course, this is used for shenanigans. We can get like many cards that are quite similar, for example, with the counter spells or something. But we could also get the 2 lands we want and also search for life from the loam. And whatever opponent gives us, we can sooner or later be in a situation to draw many cards with life from the loam, so get the cards back. And when this engine is going, this is kind of like the end tome in our Simic deck, then we can get life from the loam and also 2 additional lands that we want, and we can do it over and over again. Very nice to put this situation moving. Very good. And then there's the Tonic Rift, of course. We are Simic, we have blue in it. So this is kind of like a natural thing to happen. The Tonic Rift, for 1 in a blue, we can return target non-land permanent we don't control to its owner's hand. And with Overlord, for 6 in a blue, for 7 converted mana cost, we replace the word target with the word each. And then we return each non-land permanent that we don't control to its owner's hand. So we board wipe anything but our board. Wow, this is a mass board wipe. Of course, the opponent can play the cards again, but in a tempo swing, this is massive. And also, if we get to use, for example, like Eternal Witness over and over again, we could possibly return Tonic Rift to our hand each turn again and play it again. And wow, this is massive, really. Have to play in there. That's a staple, let's say. And then there's Constant Mists, also very nice. So 1 in a green mana, it's an instant. This is buyback, sacrifice a land. So if we sacrifice a land, we get this card back as part of this effect if it's not countered. And then creatures deal no combat damage this turn. So we fuck the turn, we fuck the field, no creature deals damage. So this is great if we are in a defensive situation or we do not want to block or something like that. This is a very great way to make sure that we don't get hit for a bunch. And we can get it easily back because the lands that we sacrifice come back for like with Life from Below and Crucible of Worlds. So this is very efficient. And then there's Capsize. Of course, when we have so many mana, why not use it? For 1 and 2 blue mana and buy back 3 for 6 mana in total. Then we return target permanent to its owner's hand. And then buyback returns due to the buyback mechanic. And then we can do it again and again and just like keeping like bouncing stuff whenever we like to. Nice. And then of course there's Beast Within, also nice. We can destroy target permanent for 3 mana, and then the controller of the permanent puts a 3/3 beast creature token onto the battlefield. Yes, but it's just like a great way of removal in a Simic deck. And then we have the Blue Sand Zenith for X and blue mana. It's an instant that says target player draws X cards, which is really efficient with so many mana that we have. So it's most likely that we can deck our opponent. You can possibly draw like 50 cards or 70 cards and then it's over for them. Or we just draw a bunch of cards that we want to, and then afterwards, just like the Green Senate as well, this card shuffles into the library after activation. So it's most likely that we draw it again, possibly. Nice. And then there's our counter package for the deck. Of course, we have Force of Will. First of all, Force of Will is just like the staple, if not the best counter spell ever printed. For 3 and 2 blue mana, it's a counter spell that counters any spell, of course. We can play an alternative cost by removing a blue card in our hand from the game and pay 1 life. And then we can counter it without paying the mana cost. And this is nice when we tapped out and stuff and the opponent does not know that we are possibly in the situation when we could counter something if we don't have any mana available. And for example, if we are in a situation where we have like Seedborn Muse, we have all the mana in the world, then we can also pay it the cost of converted mana cost of 5. And then we don't have to get rid of a blue card that we essentially really want to have because we play it in this deck. There are not that much blue cards, so we have to be careful. Many of our cards that are blue are very nice and we want to keep them. Also the surprise factor comes in handy to counter anything for free, let's say. It's a very efficient way to make sure that we can force through our entire strategy and can protect the cards that we really have to keep on the battlefield when your opponent is trying to get rid of them, something like that. Also powerful. And then there's Mana Drain. Sure, also one of the best counter spells ever printed. For 2 blue mana, it's an instant that says we counter target spell, so any spell again. And then at the beginning of our next main phase, we add an amount of colorless mana to our mana pool equal to that spell's converted mana cost. But it's also a great way to ramp. So we can play multiple cards that turn or something like that. We can play artifacts, whatever we like to. Colorless mana is always used. And then we counter something big, hopefully like a commander, like with a heavy commander text in it and stuff like that. Or a very big X spell and something. And then we can get all the mana and we can use it to play so many cards during next turn. And when we play it on opponent's turn, because it's a counter spell, then we can get the mana at our next main phase. Then the one that we have on our next turn. So of course, this is very beneficial in this deck, sure. a ramp spell that also counters any target spell for 2 blue mana. Very nice. And then the classic counter spell. It's just the same thing like Mana Drain except for the mana generation, sure. Yes, it just counters any target spell for 2 blue mana. Just simple like that. But we want to make sure that we are very efficient in our counter spell synergies. And we can counter anything that stops us, anything that will come in our way. So we can counter anything like that for 2 blue mana as well. And then there's Flusterstorm for 1 blue mana. That instant says we counter target instant or sorcery spell or lessons controller pays 1. And this card has Storm. So for any other spell that's played this turn, this card copies. There's an additional copy of this card that is put onto the stack. And then anything like this can counter any number of spells, or they can all target the same spell, whatever you want. Whatever the situation is, every single target can be one of the same spell or any other spell, and anything targets whatever you like. And then this Flusterstorm is copied. So if opponent does not have a lot of mana, then he's helpless to recover, and this card is most likely not going to resolve if there are many other spells played this turn or on the stack at the same time when Flusterstorm is played. So this really adds up on value as well. For 1 blue mana, you can counter any target instant or sorcery spell. Really, really efficient, because when your opponent does not have a lot of mana out there, so he wants to use that, then it's a very great way. It's very most used like in tier 1 decks, something like that, and all these vintage decks use it. So this really gets out of hand. You can counter like an Armageddon or whatever you don't like, basically. Nice card. And then there's Pact of Negation, just a little bit like Force of Will. You can pay it for free, but of course it has a drawback. You can pay it for 0 mana and counter target spell. But then at the beginning of our next upkeep, we pay 3 and 2 blue mana, so 5 mana in total. And if we don't, we lose the game. And that's what we don't want to happen. So of course we have to pay during the next turn. But because we ramp so much, we can play it really early on, and not like turn 5 because it requires 5 mana. It's not the case. We have so many land drops and so many ramp in here. So this is most likely the case that we can use it like on turn 3 or something, and then we could pay if you really want to. Of course, this is like an emergency setback card. If it's really, really the case that we need to play that card now, so anything else will be just horrifying, or we will lose the game on the spot or something like that, then this card is great to stop all this. Use it carefully and you'll be fine with Pact of Negation. And this is another great card. It's Disallow. For 1 and 2 blue mana, we counter any target spell or any activated ability or any triggered ability on the stack. So yes, this is kind of like a stifle and a counter spell, both in one. Of course, you can choose only one or the other. It's just one target, of course. But you can do this if you want to. It's just like Void Slime, but this is just one color. So it's most efficient in this deck. So this is very nice to get the ability going. For example, you can counter an activated ability. For example, in Everflux Reservoir or something. Opponent plays 50 life, and then he doesn't get the 50 damage because you like stifled it or trick bind it, because you disallowed it. And it also counts for so many things that the opponent can possibly do to you, like put a Mindslaver ability going, and then you can just simply deny that with Disallow. Very nice. And it also is a counter spell that counters any spell if you would like to. So in a commander deck, it's most likely not the best idea to run like Trickbind in this deck. But really, if you really just put it into your deck, because for good reasons, if you want to make sure that it's in the deck for any situation, then you most likely will find yourself with this card in hand and not much of use. But this is a counter spell and also provides you with additional value by being able to counter an ability, even if it's activated or triggered. This is very nice to have this in your hand in this deck. And then we reach our enchantments for this deck. Starting with Exploration, of course. For 1 green mana, this enchantment says we play an additional land on each of our turns if we want to. So this gets an additional land drop going as well. Additionally to all the other cards like Wayward Swordtooth and all the things that we put additional lands onto the battlefield with. And then this also happens great because it's an enchantment. So even if our creatures gets like destroyed by Wrath of God and stuff, this eventually keeps on the battlefield. So even when you play it really, really early on, then we can play so many land drops and get really high on value with all the lands that we have in our deck, especially with all this fetch land stuff and all these things. And whenever we can get lands back and something, so additional land drops is the main theme of the deck, most likely. And this, of course, is an auto-include in this deck if we want to keep the chain going. And every land that we put into the battlefield provides you with life gain if Tatyova is on the battlefield, and we also draw cards with it. So this is a powerhouse, sure. Then it's burgeoning. For 1 green mana, this enchantment says whenever an opponent plays a land, you may choose a land from your hand and put it into play. So we can play additional lands on your opponent's turn. So this is very, very nice, especially if we have like landfall abilities that could trigger. It's great use for it in your opponent's turn. For example, getting additional creatures out, for example. Like all these triggers like Ravenous Bellows provides you with a 4/4 beast token if you really want to block something like that. And it's also nice because when you use it really early on, like the first turn for example, it's just 1 green mana. If we really have it in our first opening hand and we play it and place a land each turn, especially in a multiplayer game, whenever a player plays a land, then we can play an additional land, and then when we reach like our next turn, we have like 3, 4, 5 lands already into play. So nice, really powerful in this deck, sure. Then we have the Mending of Dominaria for 3 and 2 green mana. It's 5 converted mana cost. It's a saga, it's an enchantment. First step occurs when it enters the battlefield, and then the second and the third of this effect occur. And basically the first and the second ability are the same. Let's say when we put the top 2 cards from our library into our graveyard, then we can return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. So of course this is beneficial for all these things that can do great synergies with us, for example like a Total Witness and things. And then the third is the main reason why we play it. The third effect says that we can return all land cards from our graveyard to the battlefield, then shuffle our graveyard into our library. And this is what we really want. First of all, we get some creatures back we really want to have, and then we can get all the lands back. Just like the Splendid Reclamation, we can get all the lands back from our graveyard that are possibly there, and then afterwards anything else is shuffled back into our deck. So we can draw it, you can refill our deck so we don't get that much deck out in that really soon time. So this is powerful, especially if we can bring it back with Eternal Witness that way. So Eternal Witness can recycle herself. By the Mending of Dominaria, we can get it from a graveyard if it dies to our hand, and when we play it, we can eventually get the Mending of Dominaria back, and we can continue to doing that. So this card is really flexible here to stabilize our deck concept. That's what we want. And then there's Heuristic Study. It's just like a drawing staple here, because we didn't draw too many cards already in this deck, no. Then for 2 in the blue mana, it's an enchantment that says, whenever an opponent plays any spell, that player pays an additional 1, and if a player does not want to pay an additional 1, then we draw a card. So whenever opponent denies to pay the mana, or most likely he doesn't have the mana at that point. For example, if something costs 5 and he has 5 mana, he can't pay the 1, and then we draw an additional card. Why not? Because in this deck it's not a problem if we draw too many cards. We have an unlimited amount of cards that we can hold in our hand, and also most likely it's possible that when we have to discard some cards, it's not the problem, because we have Life from Loam, we can easily discard, it can dredge and return to our hands then. And also, like if we discard a land card, it's not the end of the world at all. It's very likely that it's most efficient if you have cards like Crucible out, Rampaging Excavator and stuff, and also like Mending of Dominaria and all these things. Then land cards in our graveyard are very nice to have. So drawing a lot of cards is never bad in this deck, almost never bad. Why not using that? And then we're here for artifacts, of course. Yeah, Crucible of Worlds, just like the staple in this deck, of course it has to be in here, naturally. It's just like Rampaging Excavator, we can play land cards from our graveyard as if they were in our hand. So this is nice, especially if we get all these additional land drops going, like 5 land drops and stuff, with all these Oracle Muldaya triggers and things, so we can get all these fetch lands back and get use for it more and over again. So very beneficial right there, and it's also possible that we can totally get so many landfall synergies because of that, because otherwise we don't have that much lands going on. If all the lands in our hand are already in play, what could we do with that? With as long as a fetch land is in our graveyard, for example, and we play all that we could play, that fetches for semi-color lands, let's say that, then it's very nice because we can get them out, and also cards like strip mine and stuff. So this is also like a win condition. We can totally like strip mine or wasteland all the lands opponent has, most likely, and this is also a great way because we are in the situation to do so with cards like Crucible of Worlds. This is also like a stack staple. I love this card really. Then there's Cloudstone Courier. It's very efficient in this deck. For 3 mana, this artifact says whenever we play a card, then we could return, if we want to, we can return a card that has the same card type as the card that we played, return it to our hand, if we want to. So this is nice, because first of all, we can get lands back if we want to, and play the lands again. Of course, this is good, and this also obviously counts for creatures. For example, like all these cards that have enter the battlefield abilities. Also, like Hoof Behemoth, we can return it and then play it again. And also, so many things, Avenger of Zendikar, anything that has an enter the battlefield effect. Reclamation Sage and all this stuff, and anything we'll just keep using over and over again. We can use it again and again if we keep bouncing these cards and returning them to the battlefield, because we have so much mana to play them sooner or later. And this is powerful on its own. And also, very nice to know that we could eventually put Tatyova back into our hand this way. If we play another creature, and if Tatyova is on the battlefield and we have cloudstone courier, then we could bounce Tatyova back to our hand. Why should we want to do that? Because Tatyova says we draw a card. It's not a May ability. This happens if we put a land onto our side. So eventually we could deck ourselves, even if we do not want to, most likely. Maybe we do not like to. And then this forces us to draw a card and gain a life. Maybe something like Remedy, something is out, and it's also not very beneficial to us gaining so much life. This really comes in handy that way, that we could return Tatyova back to our hand if we want to. So stopping that effects that are not optional at that point. Nice to keep in mind. And then there's Zoran Orb, a very old artifact from Ice Age, just when I started to play Magic from Ice Age. Remember this card a lot. For 0 mana, it's an artifact that says we can always, whenever we like to, we can sacrifice a land and then we gain 2 life. Of course, we have cards like Splendid Reclamation, then we could easily sacrifice our lands and then returning them all to the battlefield, which also is a lot of triggers. This means a lot of landfall triggers. And then also we are in a situation where we get a lot of life. As I said, for Aetherflux Reservoir, for example, it's really nice if we have to use the abilities of Tatyova and also of Crewfix and all this stuff. We get so many life, and also because of the Aetherflux Reservoir itself. And then also with Zoran Orb, we get so many life, because it's nice that we cannot die due to effects and attacks and stuff. We can totally, like, a little bit of damage come through if we get so much life. And then also, we are in a situation where we could shoot your opponent with an Aetherflux Reservoir. Nice to keep that in mind. Very nice card here. And then there are the mana artifacts, of course. Mox Diamond, also a staple in a land-based deck, sure. This is an artifact for 0. When it enters the battlefield, we discard a land card. If we don't do that, we sacrifice Mox Diamond. Of course, we want to discard a land card that way. And then this card taps for any mana, any color, of course only for Simmi colors in this deck, but it is most likely very efficient, because sooner or later maybe there's a card out, just like Blood Moon or something, that could be problematic even if we have 10 basic lands in the deck, sure. And this could also stabilize our mana count. For example, if we have to keep like 3 green mana, for example, so many cards like Genesis Wave, for example, we have to keep in mind that we have to keep multiple mana of one color open at some point, so this card helps a lot. And we also can discard a land and put it into play, like with Crucible. That is not the end of the world. It just ramps us, and it ramps us permanently, not like just like a Lotus Petal and stuff. We can do it over and over again. This taps and has no other drawback other than to discard a land when it enters the battlefield. So of course we can tap and untap it each turn, so have an additional like land drop, an additional acceleration card right there for any other future plays that we do. And then there's Soaring. Yes, the good old basic Soaring, unlimited, nice. For 1 mana, just taps for 2 colorless mana, basic staple in any commander deck. Any commander deck is 1 commander, 1 Soaring, and 98 other cards. Of course, this is the case. Anyone plays Soaring, and this deck does that as well. And then there's Mana Crypt, sure. It's an artifact for 0 that taps for 2 colorless mana, but the drawback is that we have to flip a coin each turn during our upkeep, and if the coin does not end in our favor, we call heads or tails, then this Mana Crypt deals 3 damage to us. So this is not the problem if we have so many life, of course, so this card can stay on forever, and also we could possibly get rid of it by, for example, destroying it with Reclamation Sage if we really need to, but that is not a problem. It just provides us with mana ramp in the form of an artifact that we can tap for 2 mana each turn. Nice to have that. And then there's Mana Vault, kind of like the same thing, artifact for 1, taps for 3 colorless mana, and it doesn't untap during our tap step, and we can pay 4 mana on our tap step if we want to, then this artifact untaps. First of all, we have so much mana, we can easily pay the amount of mana sooner or later. First of all, it ramps us in the first few turns if we draw it early, and then later we can easily untap it, and also we have cards like Seedborn Muse that untap it anyway. Great synergy here. And then there's the land base, sure. As I mentioned, Gaia's Cradle is the all-star of this deck. We have so many cards that provide us with many tokens. Think of all the plant tokens for Avenger of Zendikar. Think of all the beast tokens with Ravenous Baloth. Think of all the elemental tokens for Titania. And all this stuff, we get so many creatures on the battlefield. It's a short period of time, especially if we keep bouncing them and in and out and have so many land drops and all this stuff. This really gets out of hand. We have a great army right out of nowhere. Even if our opponent board wipes us, we can easily rebuild. So, of course, Gaia's Cradle provides us more than 1 mana at a time. It taps only if there's a creature on the battlefield, otherwise it does not have the effect to give us mana, unfortunately. But this is not a problem. Even of our commander, of course, as a creature and anything, as long as we have any creature on the battlefield, we are fine with Gaia's Cradle. And even if not, it's just a land drop that provides us with, for example, landfall triggers from other cards and creatures. Always nice. And it taps for green mana equal to the number of creatures that we control. And this is also great because this is a land. So we can, for example, sacrifice it, for example, with Zuran Orb and gain 2 life, and then we can play it again, and then it enters untapped. So first of all, we tap it, add the mana to our mana pool, then we sacrifice it possibly, and then we can return it from the battlefield, like with Excavator and anything, with all the other land drops we can make from our graveyard, like with Crucible of Worlds and stuff, and then we can do it over and over again. This is not like the Growing Rights of Ithlimok, this is the real land, and this is really beneficial to this deck here. And there's also another card that provides us with additional value. Let's think of the palindrome combo right here. So this card also combos with this, because this is a land that has the ability to tap for more mana, even if it's just 1 land. Scorched Ruins. When it enters the battlefield, we sacrifice 2 untapped lands we control, or we bury Scorched Ruins. When it is onto the battlefield, we can tap it to add 4 colorless mana to our mana pool when we tap it. So this is nice, especially with this palindrome combo. Think about it. You can just untap 7 lands when palindrome enters the battlefield, and if one of them is Scorched Ruins, then it's just very hilarious. And also we can copy it. When it enters the battlefield, we have to sacrifice 2 untapped lands, sure. But when it's on the battlefield, we can easily copy it with Thespian Stage. And then we provide us with another land that can tap for 4 colorless mana. It's not legendary, so this is what we want to see in this deck, sure. And then there's Ancient Tomb. This wonderful new art, very nice, from the newest set right now. This Ancient Tomb is a land that taps for 2 colorless mana, and then Ancient Tomb deals 2 damage to us. Well, damage is really not the problem. We have life gain a lot, so this card is what we want to see. Of course, this is kind of like a staple in all the EDH decks these days, sure. Whenever a player can afford it, Ancient Tomb is in this deck. It's just like soaring. It's just a given. You have to put it in your deck if you have it. So also for this deck that also is in a situation that can ramp due to mana producing cards and stuff, like all these palindrome synergies and stuff. This card taps for 2 mana, not for 1, so of course this belongs in here. And then there's Deserted Temple. We can tap it to get 1 colorless mana out of it, but the better idea is we can pay 1 mana of any color and tap the Deserted Temple, and then we untap target land. And of course we can untap Gaia's Cradle with it. That's the main plan. And we can also untap Scorched Ruins. We can also untap whatever we like. So this really gets crazy. So we get all these powerful effects here. We can untap whatever we like, anything. Also Thespian Stage and whatever we desire. And we can make so many synergies with it by untapping the lands during our turn or whenever we like to do that. And also combined with Seedborn Muse, this gets really out of hand. Especially if we can get the mana save with Crewfix and stuff. This is what we want. Untapping Gaia's Cradle over and over again with Deserted Temple is just hilarious. If our board is full of creatures, let's say that first of all. But yes, this is what we want. Great synergy right here. And then, of course, another land that taps for 2 mana of any color. This is not the best choice, but of course, in Simic, we have to get what we get, right? Simic Growth Chamber. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped, first of all, and when it enters the battlefield, we return a land card we control to our hand. So of course we cannot play this on first turn, then this card would be the one that returns to our hand, unfortunately. So we cannot do that, but it's used to get multiple effects out of it. For example, we have cards like Vesuva in here. When it enters the battlefield, it copies a land. And for example, we can just use it again if we want to. We can just return the land. It's also great with all the land drops we possibly could get. So this returns a land and we can play it again. And it also provides us with that ability. Then afterwards, when this land enters the battlefield and all this stuff, it enters tapped, unfortunately, okay, that's fine. But then we can tap it for blue and a green combined for 2 mana. So this is also a great way to stash all this mana we need to. Very nice. And we also have Tolaria West in here, which enters the battlefield tapped, provides us with blue mana, and we could also discard it from our hand with Transmute. By paying 1 generic mana and 2 blue mana, 3 in total, we can discard this card from our hand, and then we can search our deck for any card with converted mana cost equal to the mana cost of this card. And as this is a land, the mana cost is 0, we can search our deck for any card with 0 converted mana cost. Included like any land, obviously, and also like Mox Diamond if you want to, a Mana Crypt, whatever our heart desires. We can also get Walking Ballista out of it. So this is really a great tutor here, especially we can return it to our hand, especially when it enters the battlefield, and then we can, for example, get it onto our hand with Meloku and stuff, and then we can get a token out of it, and we can use it again to tutor up any other card that has 0 committed mana cost in it. Nice here. And then of course there's Dark Depths, a legendary snowland, and enters the battlefield regularly with 10 ice counters on it, and we can always pay 3 mana, then remove an ice counter from Dark Depths, and when Dark Depths has no ice counters on it, then it is sacrificed, and then we can put a 20/20 token into play with Flying and Indestructible, which is Merit Lage. So then we get a really great finisher to winning the game, and also a great blocker. It's Flying and Indestructible. For example, all these Voltron decks really hate blockers like this. And it also is black. This is nice with a Simic deck. In addition to color, let's say, for if the opponent has like a sword out sort of body in mind, then we cannot block with our creatures. And then this is a black creature coming down here. So this is very efficient to us. And this is of course a combo. Of course we can also, if we have a lot of mana, as we probably will have, we can pay for all times 3 to remove an ice counter from it, and then we can get this Merit Lage out because of the mana we pay. We do not want that, of course, because we have Vesuva and Thespian Stage for it. Vesuva is a land that enters the battlefield tapped, and then we can do it. And when it enters the battlefield, then we pick any land that is not a target. We just choose a land. Any land on the battlefield does not have to be ours, and then Vesuva becomes a copy of the land that we chose. So of course then when we use it on Dark Depths, then we have 2 Dark Depths on the battlefield, which are our legendary. Then of course one of them has to go to the legend rule. We have to put it into a graveyard, and then when this happens, then we get rid of the other Dark Depths, and then we can get a Merit Lage out of it. This combo is very interesting, also used in a lands deck in Legacy, which I also play. I made a video a long time ago with this, with all these cards in it. It's a very strong deck. We'll probably check it out on my video channel. That would be awesome. And then we also have another synergy with Thespian Stage. These cards are very interesting, especially we can return them to their hand after we used it, and it's not in great use. For example, we can do it with Meloku, we can sacrifice it and play them again out of the graveyard and stuff. And Thespian Stage can also provide us with the ability to can use it to copy it again and again, because it has a built-in ability. It taps for 1 colorless, and it also has the ability we can pay 2 and tap it, and then we choose any land, and then Thespian Stage becomes a copy of that land, and it remains that copy ability as well. So we can also, if we say we want to have another land when it enters the battlefield sooner or later, for example when an opponent played a land that we really like to have, for example, then we just can copy something else. And of course it works very well with the Dark Depths as well to get Merit Lage. This is like the basic combo of the lands deck. Then we can just use the same thing like with Vesuva. Then we can copy Dark Depths. One of them has to go. The original has to go to the graveyard, and with all these ice counters on it. And then we have the Thespian Stage, which is a Dark Depths and has no ice counters on it, obviously. And then it is sacrificed due to this effect. And then we get the Merit Lage token 2020 Flying Indestructible. This is nice. And then of course there's Maze of Ith. Of course we have a lands deck, we can tutor up for it. This is very great. It just comes back if it gets destroyed. So we want to have lands like that. This land does not provide us with any mana. but it has the ability that we can tap it, and then target attacking creature is removed from combat, and it also untaps that creature. So this is nice if we attack and then something strange happens. For example, like opponent plays a spell that gives his blocker like +4/+4 or something. We do not have to use a counter spell on this if we really want to get rid of the situation. So we can just use Maze of Ith to use it on our creature, and then we can return it, and then the combat damage is not done. But it's also most likely nice when an opponent attacks us with like a big dragon or something, with anything that has everything on it, protection from all colors, because it's wielding like any swords, like all the swords of fire and ice and stuff, and things like all these Voltron decks probably try to do so. And then we can just tap the Maze of Ith, and then the opponent's creature is then untapped and is not attacking, and the damage is not dealt, of course. So this is also great as a protection land in this deck. And this also provides us with so much, not troublemaking here, because we can just avoid getting so much damage. Always great, we can tutor up for it. And then we have the Command Beacon. Taps for a colorless, and we can also tap and sacrifice Command Beacon, which of course is nice with our synergies that we have. We can sacrifice Command Beacon, then we put our commander into our hand from the command zone. This is great if the tax for the commander cost is very high. If we cast Tatyova again and again and again, let's say she dies each turn, like she's eating a lightning bolt or anything like that, with all this chain lightning stuff, she's only a 3/3. And when it happens too often, she costs a lot to put it back. And then, of course, that's not a problem. We have the Command Beacon. We can just sacrifice the Command Beacon and return it to our hand. Then our commander is into our hand, and then we can play it for the original mana cost of 5 here. So this is nice because the Command Beacon can return with all these things of this deck, all this Crucible stuff. So this is not a problem. And when Titania is out, we can also get 5 free elemental creature tokens out of the deal. So very, very beneficial. Command Beacon, absolute staple in this deck, because we do not need Tatyova to win like a game with all this combo stuff. It's just not like Lost Luck and Brago or Kalia, where without a commander it's not that much going on. But of course Tatyova is interesting in this deck, and we want to keep her around because we want the live game, we want the card draw. So of course when this happens that the commander will cost a lot of mana, then sooner or later, then Command Beacon is just there as a land that provides colorless mana instead. And if it's necessary, we can just use it and get Tatyova back to our hand. Then we have Oboro, Palace in the Clouds. This wonderful legendary land provides us with blue mana, and we can pay 1 whenever we like to, and then return Oboro, Palace of the Clouds to its owner's hand from the battlefield. So of course it is nice if we have a land drop to make as well. We do not have any other lands in our hand. We can always use that ability, paying 1, even if it's just the land provides itself. We can tap it and then pay the 1 from that, if it's necessary, if we don't have anything else going on. And then we can play the land again if we have another land drop left, and then we get all these landfall triggers going, all these tokens, all this stuff, all this life gain, all this card draw. We can just continue with this card on the battlefield. And then if we want to, if we have another situation like that, we can just slam it again as long as we have land drops remaining, and then we can do it over and over again. So this land with this little small effect is really big in this deck for sure. And the artwork is also very nice. Rarely used it before, except for Merfolk or something in Modern, but here it's just like the better home, of course. And then there's Alchemist's Refuge. I talked about it before. So this is nice in a Simic deck, provides us with colorless mana, or we could also tap a blue and a green mana and then tap Alchemist's Refuge. And then until end of this turn, when we activate this effect, we may play non-land cards from our hand and through the head flash. And then we can flash in all the cards that we want to, especially with Seed Bomb use, that gets really out of hand. This is very nice. So we can flash in whatever we like. So when anything untaps in the end of another player's turn, then we have not the problem that we run out of mana and run out of gas and stuff. So we can just flash in stuff, and we can just surprise our opponent with all these creatures and all the synergies that we have. And also kind of like provides us creatures with haste, for example, because we can flash them in at the end of opponent's turn, and then we can attack obviously with all this stuff. Also like cards like Reclamation Sage, when it has flash, then it just adds up in value. It's very, very efficient because the opponent doesn't see it coming. Good slot. Then there's Reliquary Tower. Why not? Of course we have Crufix, of course we have this Praetor's Council and all these things, but of course this is a land and it provides us with an additional value that we have no maximum hand size as long as Raiding Courier Tower is on the battlefield. But you can also tap for colorless, so perfect fit right here. And then there's Scavenger Grounds. Of course we play with our graveyard a lot. We need the lands in our graveyard sooner or later. We do not want to get rid of our graveyard essentially. But if it really has to be the case, if it really needs to happen, for example, someone is playing Marin and stuff, and plays something like every creature returns to the battlefield, like a living death, then we really need to have a tool like this in our deck. We can tutor up for it, we can recur it, and then we can use it again and again. It's a desert that says it taps for colors. Also, we can 2 mana and tap it and sacrifice it. Of course, it's the only desert in our deck, so we have to sacrifice this card as well, the Scavenger Grounds. And if we do, then we exile all cards from all graveyards. Of course, this is not what we really want. We need the cards in our graveyard to possibly get them back with all this stuff, like with all this life from the loam and Crucible and things, and also like Mending of Dominaria really provides us with all this value in our graveyard, Eternal Witness and all these things. But if it's really necessary, sooner or later, if it has to happen, then this card is here to make this happen. This is just a great way. It cannot be countered, it just has to be stifled or something, but that's not really going to happen because we can play it again and again and use it again and again. So a single stifle is not really filling up the problem right there, and we can do it over and over again if it is really necessary. If not, it's just a land. Sure, a land is not bad in this deck, right? So we take it. Then there's Dust Bowl. Now there are the lands that destroy opponents' lands most likely, or any land, let's say that. It taps for colorless. We can also pay 3 and sacrifice one of our lands, destroy target non-basic land. So this helps a lot to blow up opponent lands. This is nice because we have to sacrifice a land and we can recur from that. We can get them back very easily, of course, as I mentioned before. So this is a great tool to keep in mind, destroying opponents' lands over and over with a single land card. Nice. Then of course there's Strip Mine, taps for colorless, and can also sacrifice this land and destroy any land that we target for. Very efficient, of course. And there's Wasteland, same thing, but we can only destroy a non-basic land with it. Otherwise it's just the same thing like a Strip Mine, only one-off in a commander deck, of course. Many legacy decks lose more of them. And then there's another way to get rid of opponents' lands as Ghost Quarter. It taps for a colorless, and we can also tap it and sacrifice Ghost Quarter and destroy any target land, and then the controller of this card searches his or her deck for a basic land card and puts it onto the battlefield and shuffles the library afterwards. So this also comes in handy. We can also, if we really want to, let's say that, we can destroy our own land if we really want to, and then we can put another basic land from our deck into on the battlefield. So we can get additional land drops out of it, and we can get additional landfall triggers out of it. If we have anything on the battlefield that's used for it, maybe it's a good idea to use it that way. And also, of course, it just feels the role like another wasteland, another strip mine. So maybe there's an upside, and another thing is just not really important that the opponent gets a basic land out of it. Of course, any commander deck has basic land in it, lands that we do not want to see, for example, a Valakut or something. We could simply destroy it. Why not? And then there's one other land that's nice to destroy cards, and you see that all lands ever printed in this deck here, of course, Field of Ruin. Taps for a colorless, we can also pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it, and then we destroy target non-basic land. And each player search your deck for any basic land, and the opponent has to search the deck. Also a very nice benefit here. So they have to shuffle. So if the opponent puts something on top, like with a Mystical Tutor or Worthy Tutor or anything, Enlightened, whatever, then anything is on top. It's really important. For example, he's playing like a strategy where the top of the deck matters, and then we can just force the opponent to shuffle the deck. Also a nice opportunity here. And then here are our fetch lands. Of course, we use all fetch lands that provide us with anything to fetch for. Of course, there's no Arid Mesa or something, but anything that is useful in a deck that searches for either a forest or an island, or both, probably, or one of them. Especially now, Misty Rainforest can search up for either one of them, either for an island or for a forest. You can pay 1 life, tap it and sacrifice this fetch land, and then you can search your deck for, in that case, a forest or an island, and put it into a battlefield, shuffle your library. And of course, this is nice when it will return over and over again naturally. This is very powerful. So of course we run anything here that is really beneficial to us. Sculling Tarn of course searches up for an island card, not a mountain. Mountain is not in this deck, but an island card. In Flooded Strand search for an island, sure. In Polluted Delta will search for an island as well. And then Windswept Heath searches for a forest. And Wooded Foothills also searches for a forest. In Verdant Catacombs, you guess it, also search for a forest. So we have anything here that's useful. And then there are Terramorphic Expanse and also Evolving Wilds in here. They are foil, why not? But the good idea here is we want to thin our deck as soon as possible and get as many land drops as possible. If we do not draw a single of our good fetch lands, or value fetch lands here, then these are good enough. Of course, this just counts for basic lands and the anti-battlefield tapped and stuff. This is not great, but we can do it to thin out our deck. And we can also use it over and over again. We can recur these cards. With so many cards I like from the Loam. So this really adds up in value. So we play it no matter what. Terramorphic Expanse and the same thing. Evolving Wilds with a nice artwork here. It's just the same thing. We get only basic lands, but we have 10 basic lands in the deck. Why not? And then of course there's our command tower. Sure. So in this case in Simic it's only green or blue. Anything we want. Sure. We play it. Staple. And then of course there's our only dual land in this deck, Tropical Island. Of course in a 2-color deck there's only one of these in this deck, obviously. And this is both a forest and an island. So of course any of these fetch lands that can search for either one of those types can find our Tropical Island, of course. This is what we want, the main target, to get this card out of this deck really soon. And then there's Breeding Pool, our Shock Duel. This comes into play. And we have to pay 2 life, otherwise it enters the battlefield tapped. So, but this also is a forest and an island as both card types. So this is also not a problem. We can tutor it up with our fetch lands as well. And then of course there's the Maya Coast. This is a pain land. This adds for green or blue mana. And when we tap it, then it deals 1 damage to us. But we could also tap it for a colorless if we want to avoid the damage. And then there's Hinterland Harbor. Also nice, it enters the battlefield tapped unless we control a forest or an island. And of course our dual sources also count for both of them. So this is not the problem. And of course it taps for green or blue then. Then we have Temple of Mystery, our scry land. It enters the battlefield tapped. And then we scry 1 when it enters the battlefield. So this is also a great value when we sacrifice it or pick it up with many cards like this. We turn it to a hand with Miloku and stuff. And then we can play it again and again to scry a lot. Sure, nice synergy here. And then of course here are the basic lands. We run, I guess, 6 forests in this deck. 3, 4, 5, 6 forests. And then also 4 islands. Yep, that's our mana base for this deck. Then of course we have a little bit of a maybe board in here. It's just called like a sideboard if you really want to call it that way. I always put some cards in there that they are open for consideration. Maybe you want to use them, I don't know, maybe. And I also like to put them into the deck box if I really have to change around some things. Then they are just in the deck box if I really want to have them with me. And of course there's Hedron Crab. This is also a nice consideration in this deck, because this opens up another win condition. For 1 blue mana, it's a 0/2 crab creature. It has landfall on it. Landfall is always good, remember that. And it says landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So we mill 3 cards each time a land enters the battlefield under our control. And of course this happens a lot naturally in this Tatyova deck, sure. And also with all these cards that put so many lands on the same spot onto the battlefield. But Splendid Reclamation and all this stuff, it just happens again and again and again. So of course in this situation, when the game goes longer, then we could essentially mill down an opponent that way. With just this one small creature, this small Hedron Crab can win games in this deck. I guess this is like more of a beneficial slot, more like a fun slot. But when it happens a lot. It's crazy. Maybe you will want to try it out. Then of course there's Groundseer, that's more of a sideboard card. For 1 and a green mana, enchantment, when it enters the battlefield we draw a card. and cards in graveyards can be the target of spells or abilities. Except for cards like Eternal Witness and also like Life from the Loam, anything else is not a problem. The cards that we play from our graveyard, as if we are lands in our hand, like the Crucible of Worlds and Rampaging Excavator, are not target, of course. So this is not the problem. It also can save our lands and Scavenging Ooze from our opponent. Very nice to use that on this combination. Then we have Propaganda. Of course, it is a defensive card, you know that. It's just like Ghostly Prison in blue. For 2 in a blue mana. An enchantment says, each turn, each creature cannot attack you unless its controller pays an additional 2 mana for that creature. Why not? Then this is also very interesting in this deck. It's a great consideration. Maybe I will put it into the main board soon. It's Beacon of Tomorrow. For 6 and 2 blue mana, a really high costed sorcery that says you can get an extra turn after this one, and then this beacon is afterwards, as part of the effect, is then shuffled into its owner's library. And it just adds up on value. You can just get an extra turn. Of course, it provides you with so much mana and all this stuff and additional land drops and whatever you like to. When it's not countered, then it's shuffled into your deck, and you can eventually draw it again and again. And if it happens that your deck really thins out, you have just like 3 cards in your deck or something, then you can most likely draw this card each turn and play it and get an additional turn. And then, of course, this is likely going to happen that you win the game like that. With anything that provides you with additional value when you put lands into play, let's say like Ravenous Ballad and something, then it's just anything you need. You can get like infinite value in that situation. So why not use cards like that? You can play any kind of spell whenever you like Time Warp, whatever your heart desires, but not Time Warp. It's banned in Commanders, sadly. But anything else provides you with extra turns. Try it out, maybe it's nice. And then there's Rite of Replication. That's another like fun slot, let's say that. For 2 and 2 blue mana, you put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target creature. Any creature, does not have to be yours, of course. And if Rite of Replication was kicked, additional 5 mana then, put 5 of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. And then there's Broken Bond. It's kind of like a small spell, just like a disenchant. For 1 in a green mana, it's a sorcery. It destroys target's artifact or enchantment. And afterwards, you can put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is a great combination. You destroy something, and then you can get an additional land drop out of it. It's just my mind. And then there's Heroic Intervention. It's great to save your board state, let's say that. Then for 1 in a green mana, this instance says permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So this is nice, for example, if someone gets like an Ulamog trigger going or something. You can exile 2 target cards or anything like that. Like a board wipe, whatever your heart desires, any Armageddon. You can just make this happen that all your lands and all the other permanents that you control, any permanent, is just indestructible and also gains hexproof until end of turn. They are just like almost untouchable. Of course, this is not a Teferi's protection, but it's close. And it's in green color and it's just for 2 mana. Why not? It's not close to Teferi's protection, of course not. But this is also a great way to make sure that your board state is keepable like it is. Of course, it does not help like a Tonic Rift or something. You cannot dodge that. But except that, it's just a nice card for the sideboard. And then there's Orbs of Warding. For 5 mana, an artifact that says you have hexproof. Play like, for example, a Tormod's Crypt to get rid of your graveyard and stuff. You just cannot do that. Why not? And also when a creature would deal damage to you, prevent 1 of that damage. This is nice. For example, in Marin there's an instant combination that wins the game. These 2 key cards, one is Mikaeos the Unhallowed and the other one is Triskelion. If they're both on the battlefield, let's say you don't not want to describe it that much, but let's say then you basically lose. The game is over because you can do infinite amount of damage in all single charges to your opponents. And also Walking Ballista is stopped right there, because whenever 1 damage is dealt, this 1 damage is prevented that way from that creature. So basically no damage is dealt then to you. So this is also nice. You have hexproof and also this helps a lot. This combination says your opponent cannot really combo out with 1 of these combo components. Why not? Great synergy here. And then we have Elixir of Immortality. This is also a great way to make sure that your graveyard can return to your deck anyway. So it's an artifact for 1, you can pay 2 and tap it, you gain 5 life, and then shuffle Elixir of Immortality and your graveyard into your library. You have the draw power to draw the cards you need and do it all over again, especially all this sorcery, escape shift and stuff, they just return. Why not? And then, of course, the last card in this maybe board here, of course, it's Aetherflux Reservoir. I had told you before, this is nice with all these abilities to regain life points. Tatyova has that ability as well, and also like Curse of Crufix and Zuran Orb and stuff. And also Aetherflux Reservoir itself provides you with life. 1 life point for each amount of spell that has been played this turn. And she has an additional value. You can pay 50 life if you have it, if you want to, and then you can fire 50 damage onto your opponent. This is also great as a great way to close out the game in Simmi colors by a 50 points of damage swing. This is also what the opponent is most likely not going to expect from a Simic deck. Okay, this is just the deck profile. I really hope you liked it. If you do like it, please put the button at the bottom of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site. Please, 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 please do it. Really appreciate it. Then I will continue doing the work here for you and build more and more decks, especially EDH and modern decks and so many other formats. Tell me what you like and I will just do my best to give you all of the content and also provide you with only all the original cards here. No card images, everything here is original and everything is from my own collection. So please keep that in mind. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. My name is Teecee, this is the channel Power Staples, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!